after what feels like years of public campaigns and calls on the federal government to drop the carbon tax on struggling Canadians, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government have finally relented for one part of the country, the part of the country that always votes Liberal. Which really shouldn't surprise anybody because that appears to be how governing is done these days. Good things happen to those that vote for the government, and for those that don't, well, pretty much nothing. And in the case of the prairies in this country, things get substantially worse when you don't vote for the Liberals. After all, why do anything to try and win over new voters when you can just continue to divide the population over regional lines? The Liberals have suspended the carbon tax on home heating oil, which is one of the primary methods of heating the homes of Atlantic Canadians during the winter. Meanwhile, for context, only 2% of Ontario homes rely on home heating oil, and the rest of the country relies on propane and natural gas to keep warm during the winter. But of course, he's only doing this to try and save his own political skin, while forcing the rest of the country to shell out more money for an unnecessary tax just to keep themselves and their families warm during the winter. Trudeau is down in the polls, and he seems to be desperately looking for ways to try and stay in power. Now, if climate change were really that much of a threat, you would think that Justin Trudeau's key environmental policy to stop climate change would be non-negotiable. But when it comes down to his own political survival, it looks as though everything is on the table. Drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: will Justin Trudeau drop the carbon tax for propane and natural gas if his polling continues to decline? Let me know in the comments, and let's get into it. For those that missed it on Friday, here is the moment that Justin Trudeau had to back down on a key environmental policy driving his agenda for the last 7 to 8 years.
Today, we are announcing a 3-year pause on the federal pollution price on heating oil so that we can give everyone the time and ability to switch to heat pumps.
Now, for whatever reason, the Liberals have tried to play this off as though it's some victory. It's some policy win, when in reality, it's an obvious failure. At the core of this, the Liberals have had to reconcile with the fact that the carbon tax they were imposing on Canadians was simply unaffordable. But instead of actually helping Canadians, the Liberals had to play politics with the issue and find a way to benefit those that vote for them and to punish those that don't. According to the government's own data, 70% of households in Manitoba rely on forced air furnaces using natural gas, and 82% of homes in Alberta use the same system. Meanwhile, 40% of homes in Atlantic Canada rely on home heating oil. Thanks to Chris Sims and Gage Howbridge in the Edmonton Sun, we know exactly what this carbon tax would cost Atlantic Canadians if the Liberals didn't suspend the carbon tax on home heating oil, and we know exactly what it's still going to cost the rest of the country who use natural gas and propane to heat their homes during the winter. According to the Edmonton Sun, the average household in Atlantic Canada uses about 1,600 liters of furnace oil per year. That means the carbon tax would cost about $272 extra for winter heat. An average Alberta home uses about 2,800 cubic meters of natural gas per year, so the carbon tax will cost Albertans about $337 extra to heat their home. Saskatchewan homes use about 2,244 cubic meters of natural gas, costing $269 extra in the carbon tax per year, and homes in Manitoba go through about 1,989 cubic meters of natural gas, costing about $238 more for the winter. As I said before, the carbon tax is Justin Trudeau's way of trying to solve climate change in this country. He was going to solve climate change by punishing hardworking Canadians for daring to heat their homes the way they always have in the harsh Canadian winter, from driving to work and putting food on the table for their families. But as it now appears with most announcements from the Liberal government, even the once loyal legacy media can see right through the politics of everything the government is doing. And even they aren't afraid to call the Liberals out to their faces, something once we all thought unimaginable. For example, take a look at this interview between Vassy Kapelos of CTV and the Liberal Rural Economic Development Minister, Goody Hutchings, discussing this carbon tax exemption. She does a little more than letting the mask slip here, I think.
Is it because you've seen such a drop in your polling numbers, particularly in Atlantic Canada? I think the Abacus poll in June put the Liberals at 36%. By September, you were down to 30%. The Conservatives at 32% in June were up to 43% in September. Is this
Vassy,
just
this isn't
responding
about
to
polls,
that?
it's about people. And if No, Vashti, this isn't about polls, this is about people. And if you looked at the polls in 2015, you would have seen that we were in third place. I don't pay any attention to polls, but I do pay attention to constituents and people.
Is your government open to, because of the affordability crisis right across this country, looking at other carve-outs for other types of home heating in the future?
That's a discussion that we'll have down the road when we know that this one is working. But I can tell you, Atlantic Caucus was vocal with what they've heard from their constituents, and perhaps they need to elect more Liberals on the prairies, that we can have that conversation as well. Perhaps they need to elect more Liberals on the prairies.
And it's safe to say that Canadians are pretty fired up in the comments section of this interview. It's always about polls. That is why the Liberals ignore Western Canada. Electing more Liberals in the prairies is like allowing criminals into your house to help them in preventing break-ins. She was honest in saying only Liberal ridings get help. Every voice in Canada should be heard, not just Liberal voters. Polling equals walkbacks. How about Eastern Canada get real and elect more Conservative MPs instead of aloof Liberals so Canada gets back to being prosperous and caring about the citizens? And just to dive into the polling data briefly, the situation for the Liberals in Atlantic Canada is not looking good. Remember that in 2015, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals completely swept Atlantic Canada, taking all the seats in the region. According to the latest polling from 338, of the 32 available seats in Atlantic Canada, the Conservatives are poised to take 22 of them. The popular vote projection for Conservatives is at 41%, to the Liberals down at 33%. And from the beginning of 2023 to where we are today, the Liberals have been in free-fall mode. And Pierre Poilievre knows it.
Justin Trudeau is in total panic mode. After 8 years of telling Canadians they had to pay higher carbon taxes on gas, heat, and groceries, he admitted that his carbon tax is not worth the cost of heat. Now, what caused this sudden press conference that he cobbled together on Parliament Hill with little notice? What caused Justin Trudeau to freak out yesterday and hold a sudden press conference to announce that he was going to pause the carbon tax on home heating oil? The answer is that he was plummeting in the polls, and Pierre Poilievre was holding massive rallies in Liberal-held ridings to axe the tax. Justin Trudeau's not worried about the cost of living. He's worried about the cost of votes.
At some point, someone should ask the question, would the Liberal government be doing anything differently if their sole objective was to drive resentment from the West, to strengthen separatist sentiment across the prairies in this country? Whether it be plowing ahead with unconstitutional laws that limit provincial sovereignty over natural resources, to impose the so-called just transition on Alberta and the prairies, and now to this, explicitly exempting Atlantic provinces from the carbon tax while forcing Albertans and the rest of the country to pay up, just because the political fortunes of Liberals in the East seems to be in trouble. As many have already pointed out, this is nothing but a slap in the face to hardworking Western Canadians, only serving to hurt the pocketbooks of Western Canadians while also driving separatist sentiment. And it's also more clear now than ever before that climate change is nothing but a political tool for progressive politicians, to be used and tweaked to gain the greatest political outcome, not to actually do anything for the environment. It always was political and always will be political, because if climate change were really that existential to Canada, we wouldn't be in the position where Trudeau is handing out exemptions to those that vote for him. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.